Burnout is often misunderstood as a state of extreme tiredness, but one of its most defining features is not exhaustion itself. It is the loss of recovery. People in burnout frequently say the same thing. They sleep, but they do not feel restored. They take time off, but they do not feel reset. They rest, but the baseline does not improve. This creates confusion. If effort causes exhaustion, rest should reverse it. That logic works for normal fatigue. It does not work for burnout. Burnout is not a lack of rest. It is a breakdown in recovery. To understand why recovery feels impossible in burnout, it helps to understand what recovery actually is. Recovery is not simply the absence of activity. It is a biological process that restores capacity after load. In a regulated system, effort is followed by recovery automatically. Energy is spent, signals are processed. The system returns to baseline. Burnout disrupts this cycle. The problem is not that rest is missing. The problem is that recovery no longer completes. This is why people can rest extensively and still feel depleted. In burnout, the system remains in a guarded state even when demands stop. This guarded state prevents full restoration. The body and mind behave as if effort could resume at any moment, so they do not fully release. This is not conscious, it is regulatory. Burnout develops when pressure is prolonged, unpredictable, or unbounded. When effort has no clear endpoint. When demands overlap. When recovery is partial or interrupted. Repeatedly. Over time, the system adapts. It learns that stopping activity does not guarantee safety, that rest may be temporary, that pressure may return without warning. So it stays activated. This persistent activation is subtle. It does not always feel like stress or anxiety. Often it feels like tension without urgency. The system is not panicked. It is vigilant. Vigilance consumes energy. Even when nothing is happening, the system is still allocating resources to monitoring, readiness, and restraint. This is why recovery feels blocked. True recovery requires a sense of closure. The system needs to register that effort has ended and will not immediately resume. In burnout, that signal never arrives. Time off does not provide it. Sleep does not provide it. Rest does not provide it. Because recovery is not about time, it is about certainty. The system restores capacity when it trusts that effort will not continue indefinitely. Burnout removes that trust. This is why people often report that they feel slightly better during rest, but worse when they anticipate returning to activity. The anticipation reactivates the system. Recovery is interrupted before it completes. This creates a loop. Effort leads to partial rest. Partial rest leads to incomplete recovery. Incomplete recovery leads to faster depletion when effort resumes. Over time, the baseline drops. People mistake this for aging, loss of resilience, or personal weakness. It is none of those. It is an adaptive response to prolonged uncertainty. Burnout also alters how the nervous system processes safety. Normally, safety is detected through cues, predictable routines, clear endings, reliable pauses, bounded demands. In burnout, these cues lose their effect. The system no longer responds to them fully. This is why activities that used to feel restorative stop working. Hobbies feel draining. Vacations feel shallow. Weekends feel like extensions of the work week. The system no longer differentiates clearly between effort and rest. Everything exists in a low-level state of demand. Another important factor in burnout is cumulative load. Load is not just physical or mental effort. It includes responsibility, vigilance, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Burnout develops when this load accumulates faster than it can be discharged. Recovery requires discharge. but discharge requires permission. In burnout, permission is withheld. The system does not release load because it does not believe release is safe. This is why people in burnout often feel restless during rest. They may feel uncomfortable doing nothing. They may feel guilty, uneasy, or tense. This is not psychological weakness. It is a system that has learned to stay engaged to prevent loss of control. Burnout also changes how rest is interpreted. Rest becomes another task, another obligation, another thing to do correctly. This adds pressure to what should be restorative. When rest becomes effortful, it stops functioning as recovery. This is why people in burnout often report trying harder to recover without success. They optimize sleep, they schedule downtime, they plan recovery activities. But planning itself consumes bandwidth, and in burnout, bandwidth is limited. The system cannot recover if rest is treated as performance. Another reason recovery feels impossible in burnout is that the system has adapted to operate under strain. Strain becomes the new normal. When strain is removed, the system does not immediately relax. It has lost the calibration for ease. This is similar to how muscles held in tension do not instantly relax when effort stops. They require time and consistent conditions to release. Burnout involves this same phenomenon at a systemic level. The body and mind have adapted to pressure. They do not know how to stand down quickly. This adaptation explains why people in burnout sometimes feel worse when they first stop working. The system, no longer held together by momentum, becomes aware of its own depletion. This can feel like collapse. It is not failure, it is exposure. The exhaustion was already there. It was simply masked by activity. This moment often leads people to believe that rest is making them worse. In reality, rest is revealing the cost that is already accumulated. Without understanding this, people often return to activity prematurely. They mistake relief for recovery. Relief is temporary reduction of pressure. Recovery is restoration of capacity. Burnout allows relief. It resists recovery. Because recovery requires sustained safety, not momentary absence of effort. Burnout also narrows tolerance for recovery processes. Deep rest can feel uncomfortable. Stillness can feel unsettling. Silence can feel intrusive. This is because recovery involves letting go of control. In burnout, control has been used to compensate for instability. Letting go feels risky, so the system resists it. This resistance is often misinterpreted as restlessness, boredom, or inability to relax. But it is not about relaxation. It is about trust. The system does not trust that disengagement is safe. Another factor that blocks recovery is unresolved demand. Unresolved demand is effort that has no clear endpoint. Open loops, unfinished responsibilities, ongoing obligations without closure. These keep the system partially activated even during rest. The mind continues to monitor. Recovery requires closure. Without closure, recovery remains partial. This is why burnout often persists even after external demands are reduced. Internal demand continues. Burnout also alters time perception. People in burnout often feel that time off passes quickly, but restores little. This is because recovery is not cumulative in burnout. Each period of rest resets vigilance temporarily, but does not add capacity. The system treats rest as a pause, not a restoration. This is why people wake up after long sleep feeling unchanged. Sleep provides relief, not recovery. Recovery requires integration. Integration happens when the system processes load and releases it. Burnout interferes with this process. The system does not integrate load. It stores it. Stored load accumulates. This accumulation explains why burnout feels heavy rather than acute. It is not sharp exhaustion, it is dense exhaustion. Dense exhaustion takes longer to unwind, and it unwinds only when the conditions that created it are no longer present. This is why burnout recovery is slow even when changes are made. The system needs repeated evidence that strain is no longer the norm. Not promises, not intentions, evidence. This evidence comes from consistent boundaries, predictable pacing, clear task endings, reduced background vigilance. As these conditions stabilize, the system gradually allows recovery to complete. Recovery returns quietly. People do not suddenly feel energized. They feel less resistant. They notice that sleep feels deeper, that rest feels more real, that capacity begins to return. These changes are often subtle, but they mark the system learning that recovery is safe again. Understanding burnout as a recovery failure rather than a rest deficit changes how it is interpreted. It removes blame. It removes urgency. It removes the idea that something must be fixed quickly. Burnout is not solved by adding rest. It resolves when the system no longer needs to defend against ongoing strain. Recovery becomes possible when pressure stops repeating. This is why burnout recovery is not about doing more of the right things. It is about removing the conditions that prevent recovery from completing. Burnout makes recovery feel impossible because the system has learned that effort never truly ends. Recovery returns when that lesson is no longer reinforced.